Hi, and welcome to the Room of Rock with Ted and I. Now this time in the Room of Rock, we're going to try some Big Ben's nut sauce to see if it can aid tuning stability on our Squire Strat. To be honest, the guitar's pretty good as it is, but every now and again, it's mainly the G string does go out of tune with use of the tremolo. And in the past, I've used things like candle wax, and I've used graphite like pencil lead to lubricate nut slots and string trees with varying degrees of success. So this time we bit the bullet and we bought ourselves some Big Ben's nut sauce, as you can see. Ted reckons it must be made of unicorn milk because it's so expensive. I mean, that little tiny syringe was £12, so it obviously must contain some rare earth ingredients in there for it to be that price. But I would imagine that you don't need a lot of it, so that little syringe will last you quite a while. So anyway, I'll give you a demonstration of the Strat to show you where it is at the moment in terms of tuning stability. Then we'll take the guitar downstairs, get it on the table, and we'll apply some of this as the instructions and see whether it's made any difference or not. Hopefully it will have done. And the other thing I want to use it for is the nut on my Epiphone guitars, because you got that traditional sort of Gibson thing of the G string binding in the nut slots and clicking as you tune up and tune down. So I'm hoping that this would help that, because the vintage guitar I've got has got a Graphtec nut on it, and that doesn't do that, and so it's obviously just down to lubrication on the nut. So we'll give it a go, but I'll show you how this is at the moment as it stands. Well, this is where the guitar is at the moment. So you can hear it's pretty well in tune. So now I'll subject it to a bit of heavy tremolo use and see if it throws it out of tune. I'm going to admit it won't be the most musical use of tremolo, but really I'm just trying to show the problem I'm having with the guitar. Yeah, you can hear that's now out of tune. So let's get her downstairs and we'll put her on the table and apply some of the nut lube as instructed and see if it makes any difference. Well, we've moved downstairs now and put the guitar on a table, nicely padded so nothing gets damaged. Opened up the nut sauce, comes in like a little bag with some pictures and very simple instructions. Basically, you've got a little, let's open it up here, a little almost micro syringe applicator, I don't know if you can see that, that you gently apply a small amount of the nut sauce onto the friction points of the string, things like the saddles, the nut, string trees if applicable, and also pivot points on the bridge if you've got a tremolo bridge. And you also get, which you probably can't see, I'll bring the camera in a bit closer when we do this, it is like a little tiny brush that you can then, I suppose, just make moist and then just put little tiniest bits of the lubricant in hard to reach places. So in theory it's very easy to do. They recommend you do it with the strings on the guitar, not whilst the guitar has no strings on it, and they recommend taking the tension off the strings. But for this, as it's got a tremolo on it, I'll just take the pressure off the strings with the tremolo to be able to move them out of the nut slots and that. As I say, the nuts on this is well cut. This won't cure a poorly cut nut. If you've got a tight nut and it's binding the strings, it's not going to cure that. You need to gently work on that. One thing you can do, and I've done and it works, is if for example you've gone up a gauge of strings, so from 9s to 10s, and you're finding you're getting binding in the nut slot because the nut slots were cut for say a set of 9s, you can get a bit of wet and dry, say 320 grit, and just fold it in half back on itself so you've got abrasive on both sides, and gently wrap that round the string, and just very gently take a couple of strokes up and down in the nut slot just to widen it very slightly. It won't, you can't cut nut slots or deepen them, it won't work like that, but it will gently remove material if you're very careful with it, just to widen a nut slot should you have, you know, a bit of friction there through sticking. So that's something I've done and does work, but you obviously, when you're working on the nut, you need to take care and go at it gradually, because it's always easier to remove material than it is put it back, because if you take too much material away, you're then into another world of pain to try and either retrieve it or replace the nut. So anyway, let's get the camera in a little bit closer and we'll have a go and see how it works. Well, hopefully you can see that we're in a bit closer. I've got the little syringe, and looking at it, it looks like a very fine paste. So I'm just going to squeeze some out. It's just a little bit on the tip there. So what I'll do, get that under there. A bit under there. Put a tiny little bit what I should do is use a little brush just to push that in. So now what I'll do, I'll flip the guitar around and we can have a look at the nut and the headstock end. Right, we're now down the headstock end of the guitar where I think most of the problems are. So what I'll do, I will take tension off the string. I've moved the high E string out of the nut slot. I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of lube in the nut slot. I'll just sure that's in one. The same there with the B string. The troublesome G string. Actually, it's probably hard for you to see what I'm actually doing there. brush from. So now I'm going to try and get a little bit under the string tree so they're lubricated. I think the best way I can do that is possibly making sure the little brush has got some on it and just then poking it up underneath. So if I take that out, put my hand there so you can see, now I've got, that's it, just running that under there. And then the same with the other side, take that out, run that up there and up there. Hopefully you can see that, and just so ping that off. Now I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but I'm just squeezing out a tiny little amount. If you can see that on there, if that'll focus up, but it's almost like a Vaseline consistency. So I've now just got a little bit on there. And just wipe that up underneath there to make sure there's some lubrication under that string tree, then clip the string back down, and then the last one, again, just get a little bit of the and you could also just wipe it on the string itself, so then when you actually put that underneath, it's actually possibly a better way of doing it, just putting it on the string itself and clipping it back under. So in case you didn't see, or in case I obscured it, to do the nut, what I was doing is just depressing the tremolo on this. On a guitar that's non-tremolo, you'd have to just detune the string, taking the pressure off, so then that's out of the nut, and then just putting a tiny little bit in there using the applicator, and then just clip it back in there, so then that's sitting on a little bed of the lubricant. That there, you might better see that. It's interesting because the pusher on the syringe is quite a long way in, and the label is cleverly hiding exactly how much is in the tube. I'm sure it'll say on the pack, but it doesn't look like there's a huge amount in there. So anyway, I've put it in all of the nut slots now, and on all of the bridge saddles. So what I'll do, I'll see if it's made any difference, see if it's actually helped the tuning stability. So we'll take it back upstairs and plug her in and give it a little test. So while I had the camera set up down here, I thought I'd just do the Epiphone SG, just to put a little bit in the nut slots on this, so we can see how you deal with a non-tremolo guitar. So with this, I am going to just detune it so that I can lift the strings out of the nut. So there we go. So there's a little bit of goo left on there, so I'll just wipe that in there, and then using the little brush supplied, just work that into the nut slot. Drop that in, and then we detune the B string, just enough to pull that out of the nut slot, and then we just squeeze the tiniest little bit of that off. Rub it in there. The troublesome G-string. Again, just take a little bit of that and rub it in the nut slot. Obviously with the base side strings, you've got a bigger nut slot to actually see what you're doing and see you've got the lubricant in there. So I'll flip the guitar around, hopefully you could see what I was doing there, and I'll put a tiny little bit on the bridge saddles, which they recommend. So with the strings slightly detuned, so I should be able to just lift them out of the saddle, which I can. Then I can repeat at this end, so I'm just going to squeeze the tiniest little amount in there. Just make sure it's in. Now it says that this won't harm any finishes, so if you've got a delicate finish on your guitar, it won't harm that, but obviously you don't want to get it on your guitar intentionally. If it gets on there by accident, that's one thing, but there. Rubbing a little tiny amount in the slots now. Drop the strings back in. As I say, the tuning stability on this wasn't bad. It was just when you did tune up, you were getting clicking at the nut, especially on the G string, where it was kind of getting gripped. So I thought it was worthwhile trying it, and if it works on this, I'll give it a go on the Les Paul as well. So what we'll do now, we'll take the Strat back upstairs to the room of rock, and we'll give the tremolo a bit of a workout and see if we feel it has made any difference to its tuning stability. Well, here we are again, back up in the room of rock. Guitar's in tune. I'll give you a listen to that. So let's give it a bit of a whammy bar workout, see if it makes any difference. Well, I have to say that does sound like it's held tune a bit better, so it'd be interesting to see how it works long term. I've also, as you saw, put it on the SG, and it'd be interesting to see how that works. Now when I tuned that up, which I did a bit earlier, it did seem to tune up a bit smoother, and I didn't get any clicking as the strings went up to pitch. So again, you know, it's not conclusive, but it'd be interesting to see. But this does seem to be staying in tune a little bit better. Well, there doesn't seem to be a lot wrong with that. Well, if you like what we do here in the Room of Rock, please think about giving us maybe the thumbs up, or even think about subscribing. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to young Teddy Boy there. Anyway, what maybe I'll do is in another video in the coming months, I'll let you know whether I think this has worked long term and whether I've still using it, or whether I think it was a bit of a waste of money. But I've got a feeling it'll be something that I do carry on using as part of my sort of guitar maintenance and string restringing process, as it were. Anyway, we'll see you again soon in the Room of Rock with Ted and I.